This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. Scott's off tonight. I'm Bob Schieffer. CBS News has learned that the Pentagon is making the initial preparations for a cruise missile attack on Syrian government forces. We say initial preparations because such an attack won't happen unless and until the president gives the green light, and it was clear during an interview on CNN today he is not there yet.
If the U.S. goes in and attacks another country without a UN mandate and without clear evidence that can be presented, then there are questions in terms of whether international law supports it. Do we have the coalition to make it work? And, those are considerations that we have to take into account.
The attack on the Damascus suburbs, which left hundreds dead this week, is looking more and more like a poison gas was used. The United States warned Syria months ago that using chemical weapons could provoke a U.S. response. Two reports tonight. First, David Martin is at the Pentagon. David?
Bob, President Obama's national security advisor has just sent out a tweet calling what happened in Syria an apparent chemical weapons attack. And the commander of U.S. forces in the Mediterranean has ordered Navy warships to move closer to Syria to be ready for a possible cruise missile strike.
Launching cruise missiles from the sea would not risk any American lives. It would be a punitive strike designed not to topple Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, but to convince him he cannot get away with using chemical weapons. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Martin Dempsey is expected to present options for a strike at a White House meeting on Saturday. Potential targets include command bunkers and launchers used to fire chemical weapons. However, officials stress President Obama, who until now has steadfastly resisted calls for military intervention, has not made a decision. U.S. intelligence detected activity at known Syrian chemical weapons sites in the days before the attack. At the time, that did not appear out of the ordinary. But now it is part of the circumstantial evidence pointing toward an attack. The clearest evidence would come from a team of UN experts already in Damascus to investigate earlier, smaller-scale incidents involving suspected chemical weapons. So far, they have not been allowed into the field, but with pictures providing graphic evidence of mass casualties, even Russia, long one of the Assad regime's staunchest backers, is calling for a UN investigation.
Whatever an investigation finds, President Obama will also have to consider what he would do next if he ordered a strike and Syria continued to use chemical weapons.
Thanks, Dave. New photos out of Syria today make it even harder to conclude that the attacks were anything but a poison gas attack. Holly Williams talked to her sources there today, and we warn you the pictures in her report are difficult to watch.
2 days after the attack, more disturbing video has emerged of the aftermath. They are horrific scenes that show the dead and the dying, many of them children. This young boy described struggling to breathe and then losing consciousness. When he woke up in hospital, he said he could no longer see. It's impossible to verify how many people died, but in this crowded makeshift morgue, so many of the bodies were unidentified. They were numbered. Dr. Ghazwan Budani is caring for survivors of the attack at a clinic in Damascus. Today, we spoke with him over the internet. He told us his mobile medical unit treated 900 people, 70 of whom died.
When you see these children dying in front of our eyes, this is very terrible feeling. I can't describe it.
Dr. Budani told us some of the survivors have neurological problems, such as memory loss and confusion, that he believes could only be caused by a nerve agent.
If this wasn't a chemical attack, what could it have been?
I don't know anything else to make these symptoms with this large number of injured.
We talked with a spokesman for the Syrian opposition today who told us he is angry and frustrated with the international community. He believes that if the US had delivered the arms it promised the opposition 2 months ago, this deadly attack might not have happened.
Holly Williams. Thanks, Holly. At Fort Hood, Texas today, a military jury convicted Major Nadal Hassan of the massacre that left 13 soldiers dead and more than 30 others wounded. The murder verdict was unanimous, which means Hassan could get the death penalty. Anna Werner is at Fort Hood.
Major Nadal Hassan looked up at the jury foreman as she read out the decision. The jury voted unanimously that he was guilty on 13 counts of premeditated murder and also guilty of 32 counts of attempted premeditated murder. Over 13 days, prosecutors laid out a detailed case to convince the jury that Hassan came to believe he had a jihad duty to kill soldiers and then carried out a plan to do just that. They showed evidence Hassan trained for months at a shooting range, then hid 2 guns and 420 rounds of ammunition in his army fatigues, then went to a medical building where members of his own unit were preparing to deploy. Witnesses told of a scene of terror and chaos as Hassan opened fire on a group of 45 unarmed soldiers. They listened as a pregnant soldier, Private Francesca Velez, begged for mercy, saying, my baby, before she was shot and killed. Hassan, who is representing himself, admitted, I am the shooter in his opening statements. He did not testify or call any witnesses and made no closing argument. Howard Ray rescued soldiers at the scene that day. He wants Hassan to get the death penalty.
What we're talking about is assessing a punishment on someone that had total disregard for the lives of 13 men and women that day. Total disregard.
The judge admonished those seated in the courtroom, including about a dozen victims' relatives, not to display emotion when the verdict was read. But Bob, as we were leaving the courtroom, I saw tears in the eyes of a couple of those relatives. They've been waiting 4 years for this verdict.
All right. Well, thank you, Anna. To Egypt now. A week ago today, tens of thousands of supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood who oppose military rule filled the streets. 1,000 died in the crackdown that followed. Today, the Muslim Brotherhood called for a return to the streets, but it didn't happen. Our Charlie Daggett is in Cairo. What did happen, Charlie?
Well, today, Bob, we saw just how dramatically the military has weakened the Muslim Brotherhood here. Just after Friday prayers, we saw a group gathering outside a mosque, maybe 100 or so people, and almost immediately they were outnumbered by local residents who support the military and forced them to move on. And this was typical of the kind of demonstrations we saw here and elsewhere, these small protests that never really got going. There's a huge military presence here. Tanks and barbed wire had choked off most of the main squares. It is clear the military has the upper hand, at least for now.
All right. Thank you so much, Charlie. 40-year-old Army Sergeant Robert Bales will spend the rest of his life in prison. A military jury in Washington state sentenced him today to life without parole for shooting 16 Afghan civilians to death last year, most of them women and children. He pleaded guilty in June to avoid the death penalty. Bales apologized for his actions but never tried to explain them. In San Diego, the fate of Mayor Bob Filner, accused of sexually harassing more than a dozen women, is still up in the air. Ben Tracy is covering this one. Ben?
Bob, the San Diego City Council is still in closed session right now. They're debating whether or not to approve this deal they made with Mayor Filner that includes his resignation. They're hoping to quickly end what has become San Diego's civic nightmare.
I, please state your name, Bob Filner.
When Bob Filner took office nearly 9 months ago, he was the first Democrat elected mayor in San Diego in 20 years. The 70-year-old promised to help the homeless and bring jobs to the city.
It's going to be a time of change for San Diego.
Now, even some of his strongest supporters admit Filner ended up giving their city a black eye. 18 different women accused him of sexual harassment, including at least one city employee. At the council meeting this afternoon, San Diegans voiced both support for Filner and anger. Irma Valdez.
We're not fooled. We know this is a circus to get a good man out of office.
Julie Adams.
I came down here today just to let you know how determined our gatherers and voters are to get this predator permanently out of this building.
But many urge the city council not to pay off Filner in exchange for his resignation.
We're all just looking for a way out and to get back to the business of the city and the public.
City Council President Todd Gloria will now become the acting mayor. He says negotiating Filner's resignation and covering some of his legal costs is a necessary evil.
What do you say to the citizens of San Diego who say he shouldn't get anything?
What I know is that each day that passes this man is mayor, more bad things are happening to our city. Less is getting done. Fewer businesses are coming to San Diego, and our national reputation continues to be dragged through the mud.
Now, we're told that if this deal does go through, Filner's resignation will not be immediate, that that was important to him during the negotiations. Bob, we're told he'll likely leave office next week.
All right, thank you, Ben. That huge wildfire in Northern California spread into Yosemite National Park today. Here's how it looks from space. The fire grew overnight from 99 square miles to more than 165, making it the fastest growing of the dozens of western wildfires. The smoke has spread more than 100 miles from what's called the Rim Fire. Teresa Garcia is on the scene.
The fire is threatening more than 4,500 structures. About half are in Pine Mountain Lake. That's where we found Ken Canobio. He was pumping water out of his swimming pool to spray around his house.
Just trying to wet it down and get it as moist as possible. I think the main thing is if the flames do get up here and try to put them out.
Canobio has already packed the car for a quick getaway. More than 1,000 people who live around him are already gone.
There's a comfort zone that I have, and it's pretty much down there a few hundred yards, so it's looking like we're not going to have to leave right now, but things could change.
So your comfort zone changes when you see what?
Yeah. Red.
More than 2,000 firefighters are battling the fire. Bruce Munzer and his team work to clear brush and put out hot spots.
It's holding right now, so it's looking pretty good. The wind's in our favor.
That is unreal.
But airdrops of water and flame retardant are the only ways to outflank a fire that now ranks among the 20 worst California has ever seen. It is an incredible sight to behold. The smoke from the fire has climbed 8 miles into the sky. And Bob, evacuation orders have also just been issued for 2 more towns.
All right, thanks, Teresa. Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, announced today he'll retire sometime in the next year. Ballmer, who is 57, succeeded Bill Gates in 2000. They met 40 years ago at Harvard. Under Ballmer, Microsoft has struggled to compete with Apple and Google. Colorado gets a hailstorm in the dog days of summer. And why are dolphins dying along the East Coast when the CBS Evening News continues?